Isaiah 57. As I was reading through Isaiah 57, man, this is, I guess it's kind of a more serious book. A more serious chapter, I guess I should say. A more serious chapter that, has a lot of depth and meaning. It has a lot of applications, certainly to us, but it kind of brought on memories to things that God, or that Isaiah had said to the children of Israel earlier on in the book of Isaiah. And he's really pointed here, and he's asking questions. You know how a teacher may come in and he'd be like, all right, how many of you were the ones that were doing this? Or who was it that was kicking the chair? Who was it that was banging on the wall? Who was it? And the teacher's asking the class because they weren't sure exactly who it was. But like, okay, who was it? Which of you was it that was doing this? And everybody sits back there and shrinks down in their seats a little bit, hoping the teacher doesn't maybe it wasn't them, but they don't want to say who it was either, and to get the class mad at them. And so everybody just sits kind of down a little bit further in their seat and hopes that it just goes away quickly, right? Well, God here is asking similar questions to the children of Israel. But he starts off with a very interesting thought that maybe we wouldn't have come up with on our own at the very beginning of chapter 57. Look at verse number 1, and we'll read verses 1 and 2. It says this: "The righteous perisheth, and no man layeth at the heart. And merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace. They shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness." It says here, the righteous perisheth. Now, we need to kind of go back to chapter 56 and carry on here what he is talking about. Remember, at the end of chapter 56, he was talking about, the dumb and greedy dogs, to be frank. Look back at verse number 9 of chapter 56. He says, "All ye beasts of the field come to devour, all ye beasts in the forest." His watchmen, that's the Israel's watchmen, they're blind. They're all ignorant. They're all dumb dogs. They can't bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. Yea, they're greedy dogs, which can never have enough. And they are shepherds that cannot understand. Several pictures here given to us. They're watchmen, like up on the watchtower, looking out for enemy, but they're watchmen that are what? Blind. Well, what good are they? Exactly. They're useless. They're dumb dogs. They're dogs that cannot bark. They're just lying down, sleeping, lazy dogs. Well, they're useless, is another statement again. They're greedy dogs, which can never have enough. What do they only want? They only want what fills their bellies. They only want what makes them happy, what appeals to them. These are the religious leaders as well as the physical leaders of Israel. He's continuing on. They're shepherds that cannot understand. In other words, they're ignorant shepherds that don't know where the good place to take the sheep are, when to take them there, how to take care of sheep, what dangers to watch for. It'd be like if somebody gave me a flock of sheep and said, "Here, can you watch my sheep for a couple weeks while I'm away?" I could say yes, but I don't know what kind of shape those sheep are going to be in when that person comes, because, to be honest, I don't know much about sheep. If it's just a matter of keeping the gate closed so they don't escape, hey, I could do that, If it's just a matter of tossing some hay over into the field, every couple days, hey, I could do that. Or checking to make sure the water stem's still working, I could do that. But I don't know a whole lot about sheep. I don't know what kind of diseases to watch out for. I remember seeing a video of this little farm where I think it was a cherry tree or black cherry tree fell down into the goat pen. And he said he had to hurry up and get the goats put away and get that tree out of there. He says the reason is because this tree, the leaves of this tree are poisonous to goats. Well, I certainly would have never known that. I thought, oh, the tree fell down, the goats are eating it. Well, I don't have to feed the goats today, Well, it turns out it's poisonous and it would kill all of the goats. And so he knew that, though, because he was a shepherd. He took care of his goats. He knew how to take care of it. Oh, I'm not. These shepherds, though, they were useless. They were ignorant. They did not understand. They all look to their own way, and every one for his gain, from his quarter. "Come ye," say they, "I will fetch wine, and we will fill ourselves with strong drink." And they're just going out, and they're just drinking away their sorrows. They're just getting drunk and thinking that life is just always going to be easy, Nothing difficult is going to come along for them, and they can go ahead and get drunk, and there's going to be no problems. Well, one of the many problems of being under the influence of alcohol is that you are unable to react appropriately to situations. Now, maybe the situation is that you're on your couch or on your bed and nothing happens. But it may also be that, I remember I had a friend in elementary school when I was growing up. Her dad was drunk and had a cigarette between his fingers and fell asleep and dropped the cigarette, and their house burned down because he was not able to react appropriately to a situation. A lot of folks driving don't react appropriately to situations and get into car accidents because they're inebriated by some substance. That's one of the many, many, many problems of drinking alcohol, is it prevents you from acting appropriately. You know it's wrong to say, but when you're drunk, you still do it anyways. You know it's wrong to do, but when you're drunk, the Holy Spirit in you, if you're a Christian, isn't operating. It is the lowercase s spirits in you that are working. It's the alcohol in you that is working. And so these folks, these religious leaders, are like, get drunk, kick back. No problems are going to happen while we're out the pasture, so to speak. Tomorrow's going to be just like this day, maybe even more abundant than this day. Kick our feet up, have fun. Don't worry about doing a little bit of wrong today, because tomorrow I could always get it right if I need to, right? Well, that's not how life works. You don't know that tomorrow you can get it right. You don't know that the hammer's not going to drop. The hammer of judgment isn't going to drop between now and tomorrow. And so here he's talking about these ignorant, useless, worthless leaders of Israel as he moves into chapter 57. It is during this time period. Now, we've talked about the time period of Isaiah, and especially in the first 39 chapters, Isaiah was speaking during 4 different kings' lifetimes, and it seems quite possible to me here in chapter 57 that he's actually speaking now of the rule of Manasseh. Manasseh the king was not a good king. Manasseh the king was full of wickedness, full of idol worshiping, and full of some of the worst forms of worship of idols during the time of Manasseh. And again, I want to remind you, chapter 57, Isaiah is writing prior to any of these armies coming and sweeping in and destroying Israel. Prior to the judgment, he is warning them, and he says here in verse number 1, "The righteous perisheth, and no man layeth it to heart." You know, he speaks in chapter 56 and also in chapter 57 of the righteous being persecuted, of the religious leaders being foolish, but in this case, the persecution that is being spoken of is that of neglect. The righteous people, the good people, were passing off the scene, being replaced by wicked folks, and nobody noticed. How can that come to pass? How could that be? No doubt we have seen the exact same thing occur in the United States. I mean, we all look back at news from 40, 50 years ago, and we think, man, if only we had good news anchors like that, who were unbiased. We look back at politicians of years ago. We look back at various people from years ago, even folks on TV shows from years and years ago that still had decent standards, that still weren't afraid to say they were Christian, and put that into TV shows. And we think, man, that was a much better time to live in America than it is today. What happened? The good people died, passed off the scene. The problem was the righteousness ended with those people. Wicked people came and took their place. But here's the catch. Here's the thing that really rubs is nobody noticed. Why did nobody notice? Because the people were also living wickedly. Good men are gone. And suddenly there's these wicked men, and nobody seems to be paying any attention or noticing. Nobody is paying attention to what this means. The good king, like Hezekiah, one of the last kings that Isaiah was speaking during the life of Hezekiah back in chapter 39. Good King Hezekiah dies and passes off the scene. And then his son Manasseh, a very, very extraordinarily wicked man, becomes the king. Nobody notices the good, godly man passing off the scene. Everybody notices the pop star when they die, or everybody notices the basketball star or the football star when they die, or the rock and roll star when they die. And there's mourning, and there's all sorts of portrayals of them and memorials for them. But when the man of God dies, the world does not notice. And why is that? They're living wickedly. They're blinded by themselves. So he begins chapter 57 with this sobering thought. None considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace. In other words, there's a changing in the nation going on during this time period. There's a changing. The good people are passing off the scene and nobody seems to care or notice. There's been a big change in the U.S. military over the past 15, 20 years, where the good generals and admirals who were against, the transing of the military, who were against, the LGBTQ agenda within the military, who were putting up saying, no, we don't want anything to do with this wokeness or this ridiculousness. Those generals and admirals have been going out the door. And who's been coming up the ranks to replace them? Folks who don't care about that kind of stuff. Folks who are like, hey, it's fine, yeah. No, we're going to give classes to all of our officers so that they know how to best treat the LGBT people that are among their ranks. And so we're going to make sure we teach them how to behave in the most woke possible way, and in a sense weakening our military. The righteous pass off the scene. There's a big change, a big turnover, and before you know it, it's a completely different military. Israel, before you know it, it's a completely different Israel. America, before you knew it, we became a completely different America. America that had prayer, America that had the Word of God freely being able to be used by all folks. And now it has been kicked out of one place after another. We don't want the Bible or prayer in our school system. And so what do we need instead? We need bars on the windows. We need armed guards. We need metal detectors. We need dogs to go around sniffing lockers. And then we need the news media to make the most they can out of every single school shooting that occurs. That's what happens when you take God out of things. You took God out of the courthouses. And they said, no, we can't have the 10 Commandments on the wall inside the courthouse. We can't have that stuff. How long until they take the image of Moses out of the House of Representatives hall there where they sit and meet? The man who received the original law from God there, staring directly at the Speaker of the House as he sits there in that seat. All the rest of the faces are turned in. They're turned sideways, except for that one face of Moses, staring directly from the center of the back of the room at the folks sitting there on the stand in the front of the House of Representatives, to remind them of the directness and the importance of the law of God. But when good men pass off the scene, and they don't teach that righteousness, they don't teach the Bible to the next generation, that is what happens. And we're guilty of that same thing, though. We're guilty of wanting to be good and right and living good and right, but not teaching that, not training that to our next generation. And so the next generation up and leaves and takes the following generation with them. So it's no wonder why our nation looks the way it does today. It's no wonder why social media is completely filled with garbage. You heard they're trying to ban TikTok, and it looks like Congress may actually go through with it. Now, it's not really a ban of TikTok so much. It's that China must sell their controlling interest of TikTok so that it's not a state-run basically propaganda tool of China. When I don't know if you heard about this, but when the House of Representatives and the Senate were planning on voting to ban TikTok, TikTok actually started sending out notifications to all of its people saying, hey, the U.S. Congress is going to vote to ban TikTok. Here's a link to contact your legislator so that they won't ban us. Think about the power that China, who owns the parent company that owns TikTok, has over our legislative system in America. Because hundreds of millions of young people and adults are being just force-fed through the filthiness hose of TikTok. That's where they're getting their news from. You may not believe that, but there is a large, massive portion of this country that gets their news, their daily news, from social media. Many of them from TikTok. Can you imagine that being your sole source of news? And so you've got folks on there that are talking about all these new genders and all of these new gender pronouns that are being made up, and that's what they're taking in as if this is real life to them. Hey, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if it goes out the door. So long as it's there, it's an avenue for me to reach people with the gospel. But if it's gone, it's doing an awful lot of harm to an awful lot of people in this country. But something else will pop up in its stead. People are going to self-destruct one way or another without God. The righteous perisheth. And basically here he's saying, and nobody seems to notice. Now, it says the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace. Though the righteous people here were ignored, they were persecuted by the wicked leaders of Judah, God wasn't going to forsake those people. He was bringing them into peace, and then God was going to bring judgment down upon those people. Look at verse number 3. But draw near hither, ye sons of the sorceress, the seed of the adulterer and the whore. Now, as I read verses 3 through 10, I want you to look at the kind of idol worship that is going on here. And maybe you'll recognize some of these things. And you can see what was going on, specifically mentioned during the time of Manasseh. Now, I'm not going to go over to 2 Chronicles or 2 Kings this evening to look at the time of Manasseh specifically. You can do that on your own and see what was going on during Manasseh's reign. And it directly correlates here with what we read about in verses 3 through 10. He asks a question, against whom do you sport yourselves? In other words, who are you mocking? Against whom make ye a wide mouth and draw out the tongue? Are ye not children of transgression, a seed of falsehood, inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valleys under the cliffs of rocks? Among the smooth stones of the streams is thy portion. They are thy lot. Even to them hast thou poured out drink offering. Thou hast offered a meat offering. Should I receive comfort in these? Upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed. Even thither wentest thou up to offer sacrifice. Behind the doors also in the post hast thou set up thy remembrance. For thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up. Thou hast enlarged thy bed, and made thee a covenant with them. Thou lovest their bed, where thou sawest it. And thou wentest to the king with ointment, and didst increase thy perfumes, and didst send thy messengers far off, and didst debase thyself, even unto hell. Thou art wearied in the greatness of thy way, yet saidst thou not, there is no hope. Thou hast found the life of thine hand, therefore wast thou not grieved. We go back and he says, against whom do ye sport yourselves? The wicked make fun of God's people. The wicked make fun of the righteous. This is how it always be. You go out and you try to preach. You go out and you try to soul win. You go out and you try to stand up for the rights of the unborn, and you will be made fun of. You will be mocked. You'll find people taking videos of preachers preaching and then using them to mock the preachers, to mock God. And God asks this question, who is it that you are mocking? Who are you mocking? And in what way are they mocking? Is it just saying, laughing at the people who are doing righteously? I don't think it was that alone to be the mocking that they were doing. I think it was also in that they were trying to worship false gods in the way that God commanded he be worshipped. And so they took his worship practices and then tried to apply it to false gods. And in a sense, that was also being a mockery. He says, you were taking and offering, meat offerings to these false gods. I saw you. He said, against whom make ye a wide mouth and draw out the tongue. Of course, my initial thinking is, when the kids put their fingers in the mouth and go, my mouth doesn't go very wide anymore. And you stick your tongue out, and what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to make fun of somebody. You're trying to make them mad. That's what I see when I read this. Against whom make ye a wide mouth and draw out the tongue. Are ye not children of transgression, the seed of falsehood? This speaks to the common sin of human nature. Often we have a tendency to blind ourselves to our own sins and to our own problems. But God asks the people this to their face. Okay, who is it that's mocking me? Who is it that is sticking their tongue out and laughing and mocking at God? You see, the good people, they've passed off the scene. The ones who are trying to do what's right, they quietly passed off the scene, and God will bless them. And now what is left is a large group of those who don't care. Well, the Bible tells us that in the latter times, in the end times, there's going to be a great falling away. There's going to be a great falling away from God. We see that very evident all around the world today, especially in America, as people are falling away from God. They're falling away from the Word of God, and they're falling away from the face of God. And while there may be some mega churches out there where many people are being attracted to, they're not being attracted to God there. They're being attracted to the lights there. They're being attracted to the smoke, to the show, to the entertainment, to the person who's going to scratch them behind their ears and say nice, fluffy things for them to make them feel good as they walk out the back door, still in their sins, still on their way to hell. But not too many people are interested in the gospel. Not too many people are interested in what the Bible has to say and how they ought to live their lives today. And there will be a great falling away. Now we can pray and pray and pray that there is a revival in America. This does not have to be the generation where this occurs. Maybe there will be another revival during our lifetimes. Maybe there will be a revival where we see America turn its heart back to the Lord. I don't know. I don't know what can happen. Who is it that is mocking after God? They can mock themselves after God, but what else are they doing? It says, inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree. We're going to see a lot here in these next verses where he is exposing their spiritual adultery. And he's going to talk about it in terms of physical adultery. Here he's talking about them being inflamed or hot with passion for false gods. Yeah, I know, but the music they're using over there to worship that false god, man, I love the drum beats they got going there. And there's these little sensors, by the doors, and they're smoking marijuana in those sensors. And so I'm getting a buzz when I go in and worship that God. And the drums are beating, and it just kind of puts me in this trance when I go in there. I just get all the good feelings when I go and worship that God. I like being there. I'd rather go there instead. Inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree. Worshipping them in the ritual worship places of the Canaanite paganism. The Canaanite worship of false gods. Israel was doing those things, and it becomes especially bad under King Manasseh. Now in this picture, the Lord is using the husband as Israel. And their chronic attraction for idols is like this lust for the person they want to adulterate themselves with. Israel, you have this desire to go run free and this innate desire to go running after the idols of the Canaanites, and you just keep doing it, and you just keep doing it. And according to verse number 7, it's upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed. That's a really weird place to put a bed, isn't it? Why would you set your bed way up high where everybody can see it? He didn't talk about building a house up there. That's where you put your bed. And think about what he's talking about right now. He's talking about adultery. So in other words, it has progressed to the point where we no longer hide it anymore. Now we promote it. 100% that's what's going on in America today. Promotion of this kind of lifestyle. Hey, if you want to go and make $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a week, there are apps and websites that you can use to do that and sell yourself to be able to make that kind of money. And not only is it acceptable in our society today, no, maybe not amongst Christians. Not only is it acceptable, but it is popular, and it is well known, and it is talked about. And it is a part of so many shows and so many movies today where you get to be the peeping Tom watching someone else. Now we just take it and we stick the bed up there on top of the mountain where everybody else can watch. Nothing to hide here. Why? Because there's not ashamed of anything. He talks about the idolatry / adultery that Israel is committing with their false gods. And look what he says next. Slaying the children in the valleys. What's he talking about here? Well, we've no doubt heard about one of the Canaanite gods that Israel worshipped by the name of Molech. I've heard many things about Molech and the worship of Molech, and if you've heard of Molech, you would understand and know exactly what he is. Do you know how to worship Molech? You bring children as a sacrifice, your own babies as a sacrifice. And this is what they would do. They would light a fire inside of Molech. They would fashion this god out of metal with hands protruding out in front like this. They would build that fire inside of it so that metal was red, searing hot. And then they would deliver their babies to the priests of Molech, who would then take those babies and put them on the hands of that searing hot god. And so if you were one of the worshipers, no doubt you would not want to hear what is going on. And the drums and the music would get increasingly louder so that you could not hear the screams of the children that were being offered, sacrificed. And Israel was doing this very thing. And what were they doing? They were sacrificing their children for what? For some blessing, so that they could have a better harvest, so that they could have virility, so that they could have some little blessing down the road for themselves, for their city. We do the exact same thing today. In our very own genocide that we have going on in America, we sacrifice our children for what? For our career? So that you can get paid to make copies for some other man? We sacrifice our children for comfort. We sacrifice our children because we're lazy. We sacrifice our children because we simply don't value life. And so child sacrifice continues even today in America. They may call it abortion, but we know exactly what it is. It is child sacrifice, sacrificing to their God, which is themselves. Sacrificing the lives of all those unborn children so that they can attempt to reap some special little blessing of their own. When in fact, the child was the blessing that God intended for them to have. But that's not what Israel was doing. Israel was killing their own children here. He says, even to them hast thou poured out a drink offering. Thou hast offered a meat offering. These offerings and sacrifices that should have been given to the Lord, but his unfaithful people gave him to idols instead. He says, behind the doors also in the post hast thou set up thy remembrance. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hold your finger here and go back to Deuteronomy chapter number 6. This one I will go to. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse number 4 will give you an idea of what he's talking about here, why he's mentioning this. Deuteronomy 6:4 says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words, which I command thee this day, shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thine children. I just lost my spot. Unto thy children. And shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand. And they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of thine house and on thy gates. Have you ever heard of a mezuzah? You can often tell if this dwelling place is somewhere where a Jewish person lives or family lives, because there will be on the outside door frame, usually in the upper right-hand corner, this little glass tube, and inside that glass tube are scriptures. And they call it a mezuzah. And so here are the scriptures, the Old Testament, Torah scriptures, inside that glass tube, meant to be some sort of a sign or blessing, for these folks. And it comes from this verse in Deuteronomy 6. Now we go back and read the verse, behind the doors also in the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance. Thy remembrance to whom? Well, it's not to God. He's not lauding them for putting scriptures on the insides of their doorposts where they can see them when they're inside their house. No, what are they doing? They were supposed to inscribe his name there and his word on those doorposts. But instead, there's been a twisting of that. And now they're choosing to remember their pagan gods. And so the Israelite who reads this or hears Isaiah, they would automatically remember this and understand that it's really only supposed to be God that is inscribed upon their doors, not their false gods. He says next, Thou art wearied in the greatness of thy way. You ever you get away from God and you're trying to just carry everything in your life along with you, all your baggage. You get away from God and there's things in your life you're not doing right. And so but you're just trying to carry it all along with you, and you're trying to handle it anyways without God's help. And at some point, that baggage train just gets bigger and bigger and longer to the point where you just can't pull it anymore. And you get wearied with the greatness of your way. It becomes more than you can handle anymore. As time went on, the spiritual adultery that God's people were involved in became more than was enjoyable to them anymore. It became a great baggage around their neck. Sin likes to start that way as a fun, frivolous little thing. Right? Frivolous. Doesn't mean much. That's what we think about sin in our lives. It doesn't mean much. I can walk away from it any time. It's just this cute little thing that I enjoy. I can do away with it. It's no big deal. Tomorrow I can repent of it and it's gone. But sin never stays that way. Unless you do repent of it when it's little and when it's gone, then it just gets bigger and heavier and controls more and more of your thoughts and controls more and more of your words. It controls more and more of you and your family. That's what he's talking about. Thou art wearied in the greatness of thy way. After the initial thrill of their spiritual adultery wore off, they became wearied. But even then, they still wouldn't repent. They wouldn't say, there is no hope. Even at that time when they realized that this worshiping of false gods has become much more of a liability than it was a help, they still weren't willing to repent of it. They weren't willing to say there was no hope. They still weren't willing to turn back to God. And look at verse number 11. And of whom hast thou been afraid or feared, that thou hast lied and hast not remembered me, nor laid it to thy heart? Have not I held my peace, even of old, and thou fearest me not? I will declare thy righteousness and thy works, for they shall not profit thee. When thou criest, let thy companies deliver thee. But the wind shall carry them all away. Vanity shall take them. But he that putteth his trust in me shall possess the land, and shall inherit my holy mountain. He asks a question there. And of whom hast thou been afraid or feared, that thou hast lied and hast not remembered me? He's confronting them with the fact that they don't fear him. They don't fear him. They don't fear God stepping in to stop them. The good men passed off the scene and nobody laid it to their heart. The superficial relationship that they have, that very superficial, thin cord of connection between them and God has broken, and they have not noticed. And why did they have a very superficial connection to God? Because they had a very low view of God. Because it had been a while since God had brought some judgment. It had been a while since anybody had seen the presence of God in the city of Jerusalem. And so the people began to think that God must not be there. And so they only superficially worshiped him with the thinnest of all connections. And why do we today not notice when God's power is removed? Why do we today have a superficial relationship? Why do Christians today, churches and even pastors today, have a superficial relationship with God? Because they have a low view of God and a lack of respect for God. When you take adequate time to consider who God is, you cannot but be overcome by his awesomeness, by his love, by his holiness, and by his justice. And if I just focus on a few things like his love or his tolerance, then I have a superficial view of God. If I only look at his grace, while that is massive, while it is important, I still only have a superficial view of God. I must look at God as a whole. A God who forgives graciously and mercifully will not send me to judgment for eternity for my sins if I'm a child of God. But also the same God who will send somebody to eternal judgment for their sins if they have not placed their faith and trust in Jesus Christ, and if his blood has not washed away their sins. That same loving God who sacrificed his own Son to save the world is the same judge who is going to send the vast majority of them to hell for an eternity. This is a holistic view of God. This is a complete view of God. Not only understanding his love and grace and mercy, his long-suffering, his gentleness, his goodness, his meekness, but also understanding his justness and his holiness on the opposite side. They had gotten a wrong view of God, and it was affecting them. They had a lack of respect, a low view of God. And so they were no longer afraid of God. And you know what? America is not afraid of God either. They're not afraid of God. You may go out there and you may ask, do you believe that there is a God? And some of them might even say, well, yeah, sure. But there's a big difference between saying, yeah, sure, I believe that there's a God out there, and truly believing there is a God out there and it affecting your behavior. It's one thing to think there might be a police officer standing over there watching me, And it's another thing knowing there's a police officer standing there watching me. I'm going to adjust my behavior possibly, or at least my driving, if I know there's a police officer for sure if he's watching me, versus there might be one watching me. You see, if I'm just thinking there might be a God, then I might risk living how I want. But if I genuinely believe there's a God, would I really be willing to risk eternity? He said, have not I held my peace even of old, and thou fearest me not? Why did God's people have a lack of respect for him? Maybe in part here he says because he showed mercy and didn't punish their sin immediately. You know, as a parent, you have sometimes to judge whether or not this is the time that you punish them for the wrongdoing, or is this the time that you show some mercy? So as a parent, sometimes, they'll come and I'll sit down and they're convinced that they're in big trouble. And I'll let them think that for a while as I stand there and talk to them. And then sometimes God even turns my heart away from discipline to, it's time, I'm going to show mercy this time. I want to see if they're genuine. I want to see if they really are sorry for what they had done, or if they're just mad because they got caught, or because mom and dad are actually going to do something about it this time. Part of their lack of respect for God was because he hadn't punished all of their sin in the past. But they made a very crucial error, an error that is being made today. They mistook God's mercy and forbearance for weakness and lack of resolve. Just because God has not punished the malignant wrongdoing going on in 2024 America does not mean that God is weak, or that he doesn't care, or that he doesn't hate sin that badly. And just because God has not punished you does not mean that God does not hate sin, or that God does not care, or that God is busy. Do not mistake God's mercy and his forbearance for weakness or lack of resolve. You ever watch a young person do this with their parents? Mom and dad aren't saying no. Mom and dad aren't pushing back very hard yet. And so the child keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until mom or dad snap. Now, that's not the way to go about it. That's not the appropriate way to go about, parenting a child. I know it's easy to get into inconsistent laziness that way. But we need to be consistent with our yays and consistent with our nays at all times. And the children not to be allowed to push and push and push and push. The first time they said it was wrong, it needs to stop there. The first time they did it was wrong, it needs to stop there. But at the same time, we still need to be able to show mercy and be long-suffering, much like God is. But don't mistake his mercy and forbearance for weakness and lack of resolve. I'm going to stop here, and we will come back to this passage again next Wednesday evening and continue studying here in Isaiah chapter number 57. As I said, chapter 57 is a little, it's back more to the finger pointing and I don't like the way you're behaving kind of mindset from God. And hey, sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need the arm around our shoulder, and sometimes we need the finger in our face to point us back to where it is we ought to be, to put us back in our place sometimes. But understand this, even in your own life, we can say all sorts of things about America, and bad this and bad that, and shame on them for this, but I can't change them. I have to focus on myself here. I have to focus on making sure I'm doing what's right. And so you seek forgiveness right now. Don't let it go another day. Don't mistake God's lack of judgment as God not caring about what it is we are doing.